Hi, everyone. Imagine a super sunny Saturday morning. The birds are chirping, the sky is blue, and I'm outside in my yard, ready to have some fun. My name's Jake. I'm just a normal guy who loves making stuff, especially art. I'm not fancy or anything. I just like grabbing old things and turning them into something cool. And this time? Oh boy, I had a big idea. See, I'd been working on this giant sculpture. It wasn't boring or plain, it was wild. I made it out of old bike parts, like rusty wheels and handlebars, plus some empty paint cans I found in my garage. I painted it all with bright colors: red, blue, yellow, green, like a rainbow had crashed right into my front yard and decided to stay. When I looked at it, I thought, wow, this is awesome. It made me smile every time I walked outside. Most of my neighbors thought it was pretty neat too. They'd wave and say, "Hey, Jake, that's so cool," or "Love the colors, man." It felt good to hear that. But not everyone was happy. Nope. There was one person who hated my sculpture more than anything. Her name was Karen. HOA. Karen. If you don't know what HOA means, it's this group in our neighborhood that makes rules about how our houses and yards should look. Karen was the boss of it. She acted like she owned the whole street. And when she saw my art, oh man, she flipped out. Picture this: I'm in my yard, brushing some red paint on a bike wheel, humming a little song. The sun's shining, and I'm having the best day. Then, out of nowhere, I hear stomping. Loud, angry stomping. I look up, and there's Karen, marching across the street straight toward me. Her face was super red, like, redder than the paint I was using. Her eyes were all squinted, and her hands were on her hips. She looked like she was about to explode. "This is an eyesore," she yelled, pointing at my sculpture like it was some kind of ugly monster. Her voice was so loud, I bet the whole neighborhood heard her. "What even is this junk? It's ruining everything," she shouted. I just stood there, holding my paintbrush, staring at her. An eyesore? Junk. I didn't get it. To me, it was art. It was fun. It was mine. But to Karen, it was like I dumped a pile of trash in my yard. I didn't yell back, though. Nope. I just smiled at her nice and calm and said, "Hey, Karen, it's just art. No big deal." Then I turned around and kept painting. I wasn't going to let her ruin my day. But oh, she didn't like that. Not one bit. She huffed and puffed, like the big bad wolf in that story about the three little pigs. "You'll see, Jake," she snapped. "This isn't over." Then she stormed off, her flip-flops slapping the ground with every step. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Karen thought she had all the power. She thought she could boss me around because she was in charge of the HOA. She thought I was just some silly guy with a goofy sculpture. But what she didn't know: I had a secret. A big one. It wasn't just my paintbrush or my art skills. Nope. It was something way bigger, something that was going to turn this whole thing upside down. She had no idea what was coming. And neither did I, at first. But trust me, it was going to be wild. So, what do you think Karen did next? Do you think she gave up and left me alone? Or do you think she came up with some crazy plan to get rid of my sculpture? Stick around, because this story's just getting started. Oh, and hey, before we keep going, let me ask you something. Have you ever met someone like Karen? Someone who tries to ruin your fun just because they don't like it? I bet you have. She was that kind of person. Always complaining, always pointing fingers. But me? I wasn't going to let her win. Not today. Let's rewind a little. That morning, before Karen showed up, I was so excited. I'd been planning this sculpture for weeks. I'd ride my bike around the neighborhood, looking for old stuff people threw out. A bent wheel here, a rusty chain there. I'd drag it all home and pile it in my yard. Then I'd grab my paint cans, ones I'd saved from painting my room last summer, and get to work. I'd splash colors everywhere, making sure every piece looked bright and happy. It was like building a big, messy puzzle. And when I finished, I stepped back and thought, this is me. This is what I love. My neighbors started noticing it too. Old Mr. Thompson, who lives next door, would sit on his porch and watch me work. "You've got a gift, Jake," he'd call out, sipping his lemonade. The kids down the street would ride by on their bikes and yell, "That's so cool." Even Mrs. Lopez, who's super quiet, stopped by once and said, "It's different. I like it." Hearing that stuff made me feel proud. Like maybe my art wasn't just for me, it was for everyone. Everyone except Karen, that is. She'd been watching me too, but not in a nice way. I'd see her peeking out her window, frowning like I'd done something wrong. Sometimes she'd write little notes and stick them in my mailbox. Stuff like, "Your yard is a mess," or "This isn't allowed." I'd just crumple them up and toss them in the trash. I wasn't breaking any big rules. I checked the HOA book myself, nothing in there said I couldn't put art in my yard. But Karen? She didn't care about rules unless they helped her get her way. So there I was, that Saturday, adding more paint to my sculpture. It was almost done, and I couldn't wait to show it off. I figured I'd invite some friends over, maybe have a little party. But then Karen showed up, yelling and pointing, and everything changed. She thought she could scare me. She thought I'd just give up and take it down. But here's the thing, she didn't know me at all. I'm not the kind of guy who backs down easy. And that secret I mentioned? It was bubbling up, ready to come out. What was it? Well, I'll give you a tiny hint, it had to do with Karen herself. Yep, the same Karen who was screaming at me had something to hide. Something big. Something she didn't want anyone to know. And me? I was about to stumble right into it. So, what do you think happens next? Will Karen get her way, or will my secret turn the tables? You've got to keep going with me to find out. This is just the beginning, and trust me, it's going to get crazy. Okay, let's talk about Karen. She wasn't just some grumpy neighbor who didn't like my art. Nope. Karen was the big boss of our neighborhood's homeowners association, or HOA for short. That's this group that makes rules about how our yards and houses should look. And Karen? She loved being in charge. She acted like she was the queen of the whole street. If you hung a wreath she didn't like or painted your door a funny color, she'd be right there, telling you to change it. She was always bossing people around, and most of us just rolled our eyes and went along with it. But me? I wasn't like that. See, I had my sculpture in my yard, this big, colorful thing made of old bike parts and paint cans. I thought it was awesome, and so did most of my neighbors. But Karen? Oh no. She hated it from the very first day she saw it. The second I stuck that first wheel in the ground and splashed some red paint on it, she was mad. Like, really mad. She'd march over to my house, her arms crossed, and yell, "This is against the rules, Jake." She'd wave this little HOA handbook in my face like it was some kind of magic weapon. That book had all the neighborhood rules in it, and she acted like it gave her superpowers. I'd just look at her, nod, and say, "Okay, Karen." But here's the thing, I didn't stop. Nope. I kept building my sculpture. I'd add another bike chain or paint a can blue, and she'd get madder every time. She'd stand there, glaring at me with her squinty eyes, her face all scrunched up like she'd just eaten a sour lemon. "You can't do this," she'd snap. "It's ugly. It's junk. Take it down." But I didn't listen. I'd smile and keep going, because my art made me happy. It was my yard, my fun, and I wasn't hurting anyone. Every day, it was the same thing. I'd be outside, working on my sculpture, and Karen would watch me from her house across the street. I could see her peeking through her curtains, her head popping up like a sneaky squirrel. Sometimes she'd stomp over and mutter stuff under her breath. "You'll regret this, Jake," she'd say, all serious and spooky. "You think you're so smart, but you'll see." I didn't know what she meant, and honestly, I didn't care. Her words didn't scare me. I'd just shrug and say, "Sure, Karen," then go back to painting. My sculpture was growing bigger and brighter, and that's all that mattered to me. But here's where it gets a little weird. While Karen was busy hating on me and my art, I started noticing something funny about her. Like, really funny. See, Karen had the super fancy car, a shiny silver one she bragged about all the time. She'd say stuff like, "Oh, my car's worth more than your whole house, Jake." She loved showing it off. But lately, that car wasn't around as much. I'd look out my window in the morning, and her driveway would be empty. Where was she going? Was she driving off to yell at someone else? I didn't know, but it was strange. And that's not all. Something even weirder started happening. Late at night, when it was dark and quiet, I'd see people at her house. Not normal people, like friends or family. No, these were strangers, guys I'd never seen before. They'd show up after the sun went down, sneaking around like they didn't want anyone to notice. Sometimes I'd hear a car pull up, and I'd peek out my window. There'd be a guy in a dark jacket or a hoodie, walking fast to Karen's back door. They'd knock real quiet, and she'd let them in. Then, a little while later, they'd leave with big bags in their hands. Bags that looked heavy, like they were stuffed with something. What was going on? I'd sit there, staring out my window, trying to figure it out. Was Karen having secret parties? Was she selling something weird? I didn't have a clue, but it made my brain buzz with questions. She was always so loud about my sculpture, acting like she was perfect and I was the troublemaker. But now I was starting to think she had her own secrets, big ones. Maybe even bigger than her hate for my art. I didn't say anything to her about it, though. Not yet. I just kept quiet and watched. Every time she'd come over to yell at me, I'd look at her and wonder, what are you hiding, Karen? She'd go on and on about how my sculpture was breaking the rules, and I'd just nod like always. Okay, Karen, I'd say, but inside, I was thinking, you're up to something, and I'm going to find out what. She didn't know I'd seen those late-night visitors. She didn't know I was paying attention. She thought she was the one in control, but maybe she wasn't. The more she bugged me, the more I noticed stuff. Like how she'd get all jumpy when a car drove by her house. Or how she'd close her curtains super fast if I looked her way. It was like she was nervous about something. And me? I was starting to feel like a detective in one of those mystery books. My sculpture was still there, shining in my yard, but now I had a new mission, figuring out what Karen was up to. She could yell all she wanted, but I wasn't scared. If anything, I was curious. Really, really curious. So, there we were, me with my art, and Karen with her grumpy attitude. She kept trying to make me take my sculpture down, waving that handbook and making threats. But I didn't budge. I'd smile and say, okay, Karen, and keep going. She thought she was winning, but I had a feeling something big was coming. Something she didn't expect. What was she hiding behind that angry face? Why was her car gone so much? Who were those sneaky people at her house? I didn't know yet, but I was sure of one thing, this wasn't just about my sculpture anymore. It was about Karen and whatever she didn't want me to see. Days kept passing, and things with Karen didn't get quieter. Nope, they got louder. Way louder. She was like a storm that wouldn't stop. Every morning, I'd wake up, grab my paintbrush, and head to my yard to work on my sculpture. It was looking so cool now, big and bright with all those bike parts and colors. But Karen? She hated it more every day. She'd come stomping over, her face all red and mad, banging on my door like she was trying to break it down. Take that junk down, Jake, she'd yell, pointing at my art. It's ugly. It's against the rules. I'm calling the cops if you don't. I didn't get scared, though. Not even a little. I'd just stand there, leaning on my porch, and laugh. Go ahead, Karen, I'd say, super calm. Call them. I don't care. That made her even madder. Her eyes would get all big, and she'd huff and puff like she couldn't believe I wasn't listening. She thought she had all the power because she was the HOA queen. She thought she could boss me around and make me do whatever she wanted. But here's the thing, she didn't know I was starting to figure her out. I was watching her now, closer than ever. See, after all that yelling and banging, I started paying more attention to her. Not just when she was bugging me, but all the time. And that's when I saw something super weird. One night, I couldn't sleep. It was late, way past bedtime, and I was sitting by my window, looking out at the dark street. That's when I saw it. A guy in a black hoodie crept out of Karen's back door. He was moving fast, like he didn't want anyone to see him. And he wasn't alone, he was carrying a big bag. Not a little grocery bag, but a huge one, like a trash bag, all lumpy and heavy. He looked around, then ran off into the night. Weird, right? Super weird. I rubbed my eyes, thinking maybe I was dreaming. But nope, it was real. My heart started beating fast. What was that guy doing at Karen's house? What was in that bag? I didn't know, but I knew it wasn't normal. Karen was always acting so perfect, like she was better than everyone, but now I was starting to think she was hiding something. Something big. So, I grabbed a notebook from my desk, the one I used to draw ideas for my sculpture, and started writing stuff down. I wrote the date, the time, and what I saw: guy in black hoodie. Big bag. Sneaky. Karen's house. I decided to keep track of everything weird from then on. The next day, Karen was back at it. She banged on my door again, yelling about my sculpture. I mean it, Jake. Take it down, or else. I just smiled and said, okay, Karen, like always. But inside, I was thinking about that guy with the bag. I didn't tell her I saw anything. Nope. I kept that secret to myself. She kept yelling, and I kept watching. A few nights later, it happened again. Another stranger showed up at her house, different guy, same sneaky stuff. This time, he had a backpack, and he left real quick too. I wrote that down too: nighttime. New guy. Backpack. Karen's back door. My notebook was starting to fill up. Karen didn't know I was doing this. She thought I was just some silly guy who liked making art. She'd march around, waving her HOA handbook, saying stuff like, "You're in big trouble, Jake." But I wasn't worried about her anymore. I was too busy wondering what she was up to. Her fancy car was still gone a lot, and those strange people kept coming and going. I'd see them late at night, when the street was quiet and dark. Sometimes I'd hear a car engine start up, real soft, and I'd peek out to see headlights disappearing around the corner. It was like a mystery movie, and I was right in the middle of it. Then, last Friday, things got even crazier. I was outside in my yard, adding a shiny hubcap to my sculpture. The sun was out, and I was feeling good. My art was almost done, and it looked awesome, like a big, sparkly rainbow tower. I was humming a little song, screwing the hubcap on tight, when I heard her voice. "That's it, Jake." Karen screamed, marching across the street with her phone in her hand. She was madder than ever. Her hair was all messy, and her eyes were wild. "I've had enough of your junk," she shouted. "I'm calling 911 right now. The cops are coming for you." She held up her phone and started dialing, smirking like she'd finally won. "Hello, police," she said, loud enough for me to hear. "There's a problem at 42 Maple Street. You need to come quick." I just stood there, watching her. I didn't run or yell or anything. I shrugged my shoulders and said, "Okay, Karen," then went back to fixing my hubcap. She thought she had me trapped. She thought the cops would show up, see my sculpture, and make me take it down. She thought she was so smart. But here's the best part: she didn't know something. While she was busy yelling and calling 911, I'd already made a call of my own. Yep, me, Jake, the art guy, had picked up the phone earlier that week. Can you guess who I called? I'm not telling you yet, but trust me, it's a big deal. Karen was standing there, thinking she was about to ruin my day, but she had no idea what was coming. My sculpture wasn't the only thing shining that day. My secret was too, and it was about to light everything up. So, what do you think? Was Karen really going to get me in trouble, or was my call going to change the game? Keep going with me, because this story's about to get super exciting. I'd been watching her, writing stuff down, and now it was all building up to something huge. Karen thought she was the boss, but maybe, just maybe, I had a trick up my sleeve she'd never see coming. Stick around, it's going to be good. Okay, here we go. This is the big moment. Picture it, a sunny Friday afternoon, and I'm standing in my yard next to my awesome sculpture. It's all shiny and colorful, with bike parts and paint cans sparkling in the light. I'm feeling pretty good, just chilling, when Karen comes storming over. She's got her phone in her hand, and she's smirking like she's the smartest person ever. She's been yelling at me for weeks about my art, and now she thinks she's finally going to win. Karen stops right in front of me, her eyes all squinty and mean. She holds up her phone and starts dialing. "Yes, hello, there's a disturbance at 42 Maple Street," she says into the phone, loud and proud. She's glaring at me the whole time, Like she's saying, I got you now, Jake. Her voice is sharp, and she's acting like she's calling the cops to come take my sculpture away. Hurry up, she adds, then hangs up. That smirk on her face gets bigger, and she crosses her arms, staring at me like I'm in big trouble. I don't move. Nope. I just lean against my sculpture, my arms crossed too, and wait. I don't say anything. I don't yell or run or cry. I just stand there, cool as can be, watching her. Karen thinks she's so clever. She thinks the police are going to show up, see my art, and drag me off or something. She's practically dancing, she's so happy. You're done, Jake, she says, pointing at my sculpture. This junk is gone, and you're going to learn to follow the rules. 2 minutes go by super fast and then we hear it. Sirens. Loud, wailing sirens coming closer and closer. A police car rolls up the street, its red and blue lights flashing like crazy. It stops right in front of my house, and Karen's smirk gets huge. She looks at me like she's won a big prize. See, she says, all smug. I told you. The cops are here for you now. She's so sure she's right. She's bouncing on her toes, waiting for them to come yell at me. But then something funny happens. The cops don't come to me. Nope. 2 officers climb out of the car, and they don't even look my way. They turn and walk straight across the street right to Karen's front door. I see her face change. That big smirk? It starts to slip. Her eyes get wide, and her mouth opens a little, like she's confused. What's going on, she says, her voice all shaky now. She's not so loud anymore. One of the cops, a tall guy with a serious face, knocks on her door. Then he looks at her and says, Karen Mitchell. She nods, still looking lost. We've got a warrant for your arrest. Boom, just like that, her jaw drops. I mean, it falls so fast it's like it hits the ground. She stares at the cop, her hands flapping like she doesn't know what to do. Arrest, she squeaks. Me? What? No, you've got the wrong person. I called you about him. She points at me, her fingers shaking. I'm still leaning on my sculpture, watching it all. I don't say a word, but inside, I'm smiling big. See, here's the secret: Karen didn't know I'd been one step ahead of her this whole time. Remember those weird late-night visitors I saw at her house? The guys in hoodies with big bags. I'd been writing it all down in my notebook: dates, times, everything. It was super suspicious, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. So, a few weeks ago, I called the police myself. Yep, me, Jake, the art guy, picked up the phone and tipped them off. I told the cops, hey, something funny's going on at Karen's house. People keep showing up at night, sneaking around with bags. You might want to check it out. I didn't know what it was, but I had a feeling it was bad. And guess what? The police listened. They'd been watching Karen for weeks quietly, so she wouldn't know. They saw the same stuff I did: strange guys, big bags, her car leaving all the time. And they figured it out. Karen wasn't just an annoying neighbor who hated my sculpture. Nope. She was running a whole secret operation out of her garage. What kind of operation? Well, it turns out Karen was selling stolen stuff like bikes, tools, and all kinds of things she'd gotten from who knows where. Those guys I saw. They were her helpers, sneaking in and out with the goods. She'd been doing it for months, acting all perfect and bossy while hiding this huge secret. And get this, she was so busy yelling at me about my art that she didn't even notice the cops were onto her. Who saw that coming? Not Karen, that's for sure. The cop keeps talking. Karen Mitchell, you're under arrest for theft and running an illegal business, he says. She's shaking her head, saying, no. This is a mistake. But the other cop pulls out handcuffs, and they click them on her wrists. Her face goes white, like all the color just drains out. She looks at me, her eyes all wild, and yells, "This is your fault, Jake." I just shrug and wave a little, like, "Bye, Karen." The neighbors start peeking out their windows now. Old Mr. Thompson's on his porch, sipping lemonade and staring. The kids down the street stop their bikes to watch. Everyone's whispering, like, "What's happening to Karen?" She's still shouting as the cops walk her to the car. "I'm the HOA president. You can't do this. But they can, and they do. They open the car door, and she has to duck inside. That smirk she had. Gone. Totally gone. I'm still by my sculpture, watching it all go down. The cops glance at me, and one of them nods, like he's saying, "Good job, kid." I nod back. Karen thought she'd get me in trouble, but instead, she got herself caught. My art didn't break any rules, but her secrets? They broke a whole bunch of laws. Who'd have thought the guy with the paint cans would turn the tables like that? So, what do you think? Did you see that twist coming? Karen sure didn't. Stick around, because there's more to tell. This story's not over yet. Okay, let's wrap this up. So, there's Karen, standing in her yard, her face turning super white like a ghost as the cops put handcuffs on her wrists. Click, click, they lock tight, and she's freaking out. "This is a mistake," she shouts, her voice all loud and shaky. "You've got the wrong person." But the cops? They don't even blink. They've heard it all before. They just hold her arms and start walking her to the police car. She's still yelling, but they're done listening. All around the neighborhood, people are watching. Neighbors peek out their windows, pulling back curtains to see what's going on. Some lean out their doors, whispering to each other. "Is that Karen?" they say. "What did she do?" The kids on their bikes stop riding and stare, their mouths open. Old Mr. Thompson's on his porch, holding his lemonade, his eyes big. Everyone's shocked. Me. I'm just standing in my yard, right next to my shiny sculpture. I give Karen a little wave as she goes by. "See ya, Karen," I say, nice and quiet. My sculpture's gleaming in the sun, all colorful and proud, like it's happy too. The cops push Karen into the back of their car. She's still yelling stuff like, "I'm the HOA boss. You can't do this." But the door slams shut, and the sirens start up again. They drive off, lights flashing, and she's gone. Just like that. The street gets quiet, and I look around. One of the cops, a big guy with a friendly face, turns to me before he leaves. He nods and says, "Nice art, kid." I smile and nod back. It feels good, you know? Like I did something right. Later that day, I hear the whole story from a neighbor who talked to the police. Turns out Karen had been selling stolen stuff like bike parts, tools, and all kinds of things. She'd been sneaking them into her garage and letting those shady guys pick them up at night. That's what was in those big bags I saw. She'd been doing it for months, acting all bossy and perfect while breaking the law. Crazy, right? She was so busy judging my sculpture, calling it junk, that she didn't even notice I'd figured her out. I turned her own game around on her, and now she's in big trouble. My yard's a little famous now. People walk by and point at my sculpture, saying, "That's the one Karen hated." Some even stop to take pictures. The kids think I'm cool, and Mr. Thompson keeps telling everyone how I helped catch her. Karen. She's not bossing anyone around anymore. No more banging on doors or waving her HOA handbook. She's gone, and the neighborhood feels a lot nicer without her yelling. So, that's it. Karen thought she'd win, but she lost big time. My art stayed, and justice got served. What do you think? Pretty wild, huh? My sculpture's still here, shining bright, and I'm just happy I stood up for what I love. Okay, let's finish this story with something to think about. You ready? Here's the big lesson I learned: sometimes the loudest people like Karen are hiding the biggest secrets. Think about it. She was always yelling, always pointing fingers, acting like she was better than everyone. She'd bang on my door, wave her little rule book, and tell me my sculpture was junk. She was so loud, you couldn't miss her. But all that noise? It was like a trick. She was hiding something huge, something sneaky and wrong. And while she was busy being loud, I was quiet, just watching and waiting. Turns out, her big secret couldn't stay hidden forever. I didn't start this to take Karen down. Nope. That wasn't my plan at all. I'm just Jake, a regular guy who loves making art. All I wanted was to build my sculpture, splash some paint on it, and have fun. I wanted to see it shine in my yard and make people smile. That's it. I didn't care about fighting or winning or anything like that. But when Karen kept coming after me, trying to stop me, I didn't give up. I stood up for what I loved, my art. And you know what? When you do that, when you stick to what matters to you, the truth has a funny way of popping out. It's like magic, but real. Karen thought she could scare me. She thought her loud voice and her HOA rules would make me take my sculpture down. But I kept going. I kept painting, kept building, kept smiling. And while I was doing that, I saw her secrets, those late night visitors, those big bags. I didn't even mean to find them at first. It just happened because I wouldn't back down. That's the cool part. When you stand up for yourself, even quietly, things start to happen. The truth comes out, and the people who are wrong like Karen get caught. So, what do you think? Should I make another sculpture to celebrate? I'm thinking about it. Maybe something even bigger, with more colors and more bike parts. Something to say, hey, I'm still here, and I'm still making art. Drop a comment below and tell me yes or no. I'd love to hear what you'd do. Maybe you've got an idea for what it should look like, something wild or funny or super cool. Let me know. I'm excited to see what you say. And here's one last thing to remember: never judge a guy by his paint cans. Or a girl by her brushes, or anyone by what they love to do. Karen looked at me and saw some silly guy with junk in his yard. She thought I was nothing special, just someone she could boss around. But she was wrong. I had more going on than she ever guessed. And her? She was the one with the real mess, not me. So, don't be quick to judge people. That quiet kid drawing pictures or the girl building a fort, they might surprise you. They might have something awesome inside them, just waiting to shine. And the loud ones picking on them, they might be the ones who get caught in the end. This whole thing taught me something big. You don't have to be loud to be strong. You don't have to yell or fight to win. Sometimes, just doing what you love quietly, happily is enough. It's like my sculpture. It didn't say a word, but it stood there, bright and tall, and it won anyway. So, keep being you. Keep making your art, or playing your games, or whatever makes you happy. Don't let the Karens of the world stop you. Because when you stick with it, the truth comes out, and the good stuff wins. What about you? What do you love to do? Tell me in the comments, I want to hear. And hey, maybe we can all make something cool together someday. For now, I'm just glad my yard's peaceful again. No more banging doors, no more yelling. Just me, my sculpture, and a big, sunny day. That's a pretty great ending, right? Keep shining, everyone, you've got this.